Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, the podcast with Dr. Susan Crockett. You are listening to episode number 18, Create a Life Better Than the Buzz, an interview with fellow certified life coach, Jennifer Cruikshank. This episode is dedicated to all of you who struggle with the buzz.
Welcome to Becoming Virtuosa, where women learn to love their lives. Do you find yourself frustrated by society's expectations? Looking for practical advice on how to discover your talents and level up your life? You found the right place. Here's your host, U.S. News top doctor, robotic surgeon, and certified life coach, Dr. Susan Crockett.
Hello, my virtuosas and my VITs, my virtuosas in training. I'm your host, Dr. Susan Crockett. You can call me Sue because we're having girl talk. And we are having a very special episode today. Before we get into that, I want to tell you a little story about something that happened to me this week. I commute from where I live, which is about 30 miles outside of San Antonio. I drive into the hospital. And yesterday, I was driving into the hospital, and about 2/3 of the way there, I was on the highway going 70 miles an hour. And I looked down on my left window next to my rear view or my driver's side little mirror that looks on the side of the car, and there is this giant katydid sitting there. So for those of you that are not familiar with Texas bugs, we grow everything big in Texas. A katydid, it's related to a grasshopper, but it's a little cuter and a pretty big bug. It's about 3 or 4 centimeters in length, and it looks like a green leaf. Its wings look just like, kind of curved, pretty green leaves, and it's got these ginormous antlers. So it's called some people call it the longhorn grasshopper. Anyway, there was this katydid, and it was on the outside of my window, and it was hanging on to the window and the edge of the window while I was going 70-something miles an hour. The wind was whipping it. And I'm sitting there looking at this little bug. I'm like, oh my gosh. First of all, it's just this amazing creature. It's beautiful. And then I'm like, how is this thing hanging on? Right? Like, how in the world? It's got amazing strength. It's got these scrawny little legs and it's on the outside of the glass. Like, how in the world is it not just getting blown off and smothered to smithereens? And I thought, you know what? This is a really good story to start off the talk for today. Because today what we're talking about is creating a life that's better than the buzz being alcohol. And this episode is for all of you guys who are, that you're not an alcoholic, you're functional, you don't need to be admitted to an outpatient treatment center. But it's for all of you who think once in a while, just like, maybe I should be drinking just a little bit less. Maybe I should cut back. And I think this little metaphor about this bug hanging on is sometimes what happens to us in life. And a lot of times I see my patients and my friends, and they're using this alcohol sometimes daily, but not in a way that makes them a total drunk or unable to function. They're just using it to help hang on to life. And I'm going to suggest that maybe if this little bug can do it, that we can get some encouragement from that. So today I'm doing an interview with one of my certified life coaches from Virtuosa Coaching. Her name is Jennifer Cruikshank, and she is a certified life coach, but she also has a master's degree in counseling psychology. And she has a practice that does this. She helps women, patients, people, but primarily women who have the idea that maybe they just want to cut back a little bit. She helps us look at our lives in the way that we do as virtuosas, in that she helps us evaluate what would life look like if we were drinking less or not drinking. So she doesn't require you to stop drinking. There's no labels here. There's also some disclaimer and disclosure going into this podcast. So what we are doing here in this conversation between she and I that I'm going to get to in just a minute, this is not a substitution for medical care. So what she does is different than treatment for alcoholism. And for any of you who are struggling with alcoholism I would totally encourage you to seek medical treatment and therapy. And, there's lots of other ways to approach alcohol. This way, and specifically, is a way that helps people understand and decondition their habit so they can decrease their desire for it. So it's addressing one part of the pathway in our brains, which is the habit pathway. And this is applicable to any bad habit. She has a way of helping people see where they're stuck, where their brains are getting in the way. So we're not talking about the medical condition of being dependent on alcohol here or the bad effects of it in your body, which we're all well aware of. This technique and what we're talking about today is specifically a tool about helping manage your brain around where you're stuck and where the habits are. She helps us to learn and apply tools for creating lives where we don't need to take the edge off or have a buzz or escape from whatever's going on. And so this is more of an educational type of program versus medical diagnosis or advice or substance abuse treatment. And this is important for me, for you guys to understand too, because as a physician, what I'm offering here today is not medical advice or diagnosis. We are having a conversation about education, about some other tools that can be used in addition to those things, about deconditioning ourselves for habits. So maybe drinking is not your thing. Maybe you have other habits like overeating or overspending. In any case, I think you'll find this interview fascinating. And so let's get on with it. Welcome, Jennifer. All right, my virtuosos, I am so excited to introduce you to my friend Jennifer Cruikshank today. She is a fellow certified life coach and also has a master's degree in counseling psychology. She specializes in helping women change their drinking patterns and become more resilient, which fits in really great with the theme of our podcast in becoming virtuosa or becoming the best version of our feminine selves. Most of what I see in my practice and with my friends are women who are very functional, live very happy lives, but just kind of get into that habit of drinking wine every night or drinking a little bit more than they want to. And I love Jennifer's approach to this. It may not be for everybody. We mentioned in the intro that this is not for people who are having serious alcohol dependencies or anything like that. But Jennifer has a lot of really great information to share. We're going to have a fun conversation today. So I'm going to invite you to listen in on our girl talk. Hey, Jennifer, how are you today?
Hi, Sue. I'm great. How are you?
I am having a great Saturday. I have my little Ollie dog next to me. He's always behind me.
Oh, literally. And you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an Ollie too.
You do?
Yeah, I mean, named Ollie, but he can't be in here because he's a barker.
He's a barker. Thanks. Thanks, Jennifer. Our listeners thank you too. Jen, we all have our ways of coming to life coaching. We all have our stories, and my listeners have heard my story. But one of the fun things about doing these interview podcasts is I'm getting to hear my individual coach's story. So tell me how you came to become a certified life coach, and particularly how did you end up in this niche with the alcohol?
Sure. So I came to life coaching and sort of this niche with alcohol in the same way. I had been struggling to get traction with my drinking for years. I never considered myself a heavy drinker. I never had any major consequences like a DUI. I wasn't, ever passing out on my kids at home, anything like that.
Yeah.
I was drinking more than I wanted and more often than I wanted. And I didn't like how I was feeling as a result. I had also started to think more about what I was role modeling for my kids.
Right. I think that's something that a lot of our listeners can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just kind of around and they start thinking like, is this really what I want for my life and for my kids? And then what?
Well, so then I would try to cut back or take a break. And I did this on numerous occasions. And every time I would start strong, but eventually I would lose momentum or I would replace it with a different habit I didn't want, like zoning out in front of Netflix or, eating like volumes of popcorn.
Right. Just another form of buffering, right? That doing something where you're not being productive.
And I had no idea that's what was going on at the time. In fact, I had started to think like I was broken. Something was wrong with me. And so I turned to the Google for answers. And just the mainstream solutions I was finding felt more extreme than what I needed. And also just I didn't like the idea of being powerless over alcohol didn't really resonate with me. And I didn't, want to wear a label for the rest of my life that I didn't necessarily think applied. And I didn't want to seek out a group. Really, I wasn't comfortable with that at that point
Yeah.
to through this. I just felt like, hey, I'm just drinking a little more than I want. I feel like there's a missing puzzle piece here I need to figure out.
So, you know what? I think this idea is worth sitting and talking about for just a minute because I'm aware that there are a lot of different programs, a lot of different philosophies about alcohol and alcoholism, certainly within the medical field, where we've labeled it as a disease and there's disease process that happens as a result of it. And those things are all legitimate. But part of the idea of doing this Becoming Virtuosa podcast, part of the main idea about it is in learning to become ourselves. Like becoming a virtuosa is becoming the absolute best version of yourself,
Mhm.
which that's an easy tagline. But what it really means is listening to that still small knowing that's inside of you and figuring out where it lines up with what you see in the world and where it doesn't. And I think these different ways of looking at alcoholism and alcohol abuse, substance abuse, alcohol overuse or over drinking, there are many different problems and there are many different solutions. And I think what's important for our listeners as they're listening to us talk about this particular way of thinking is that I see you, Jennifer, listening to your heart. Like what you were seeing in the solution that you had didn't fit. It wasn't a one size fits all box, but you were able to find that piece inside of you that said, no, I'm going to listen to that still small voice for what's right for me. And that was you becoming your virtuoso self.
Yes.
You didn't call it that. You didn't know
No.
that. Right? So
No.
it doesn't discount or discredit the other types of programs. Those speak to people at their soul level and are very important to them. And I think when we have something like this, which can be a hot button or hot topic, that the reason people get really excited or upset or angry or passionate about it is because of that soul connection to what feels like truth for them and they're listening to their soul. So I thought that was a really important piece for us to talk about. I love how it fits into the whole theme of us as women listening to our hearts, our souls, and coming into greater connection with our whatever we call God, our spiritual center. So when you started looking at this for over drinking and you noticed that those things were incongruent or they didn't seem true to you,
Mhm.
how did you find this something other? Where did that come from?
Well, I had a lucky conversation with a friend of mine, Mike, one night. He was sort of on a similar path and he was just taking a different approach. He had sort of set aside these mainstream approaches and was just really questioning his assumptions about alcohol, just common beliefs in the cultural narrative, like alcohol makes you more fun or everybody drinks, just these kind of
Yeah.
foundational beliefs we have been about alcohol. And I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, I hadn't thought about it. I assumed all those things were true about alcohol. But then I started to think like, is that really true? And so I think him talking to me about that just sort of set me on this path of looking for, at first challenging the beliefs I had about it and just piecing together, my background in counseling psychology, where I had studied a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. And then coming across Brooke Castillo's work at the Life Coach School, I sort of combined those two into what became a lasting solution for me. And that's what I now offer clients.
That is so cool. That is
Yeah.
really cool. So tell me a little bit about how you begin with clients. Like, tell me about this thing that you teach called the learning model and how that fits into all of this.
Yeah. So you referred to some of the frameworks that our society has traditionally used to explain, alcohol use, like the disease model, the genetic model. There's that sort of character flaw thinking, like you need more willpower, that sort of thing. But then I came across the learning model, which really resonated for me and seemed to explain my experience. And the learning model basically just says that drinking is a learned habit. So, in other words, over time and through repeated action, we inadvertently taught our brains to expect a reward in the form of alcohol in response to certain cues like situations, time of day, particular emotions. And by the reward of alcohol, I mean that dopamine hit you get that's pleasurable. And also, for many of us, alcohol can provide relief from uncomfortable emotion like boredom, loneliness, sadness, stress.
Anxiety.
We talk
Yeah.
about anxiety is a big one, like that people seek relief through alcohol for. Of course, it ultimately doesn't work because alcohol is throwing your body out of homeostasis. But that initial drink, it does help to relax you.
So if I'm hearing you right, we're not saying that alcohol doesn't have physical effects on the body that reinforce the addiction at all, because we know that those things exist. But what I hear you saying is that there's a groove, a
Mhm,
pathway of habit
mhm.
that in addition to the physical addiction of alcohol, there's a brain neural pathway that like any other habit, like biting your nails or I don't know,
You're
name it,
exactly right, but the reward that alcohol gives you is so much greater, right,
right?
than the dopamine hit you get from biting your nails. So
That's
that's
the thing.
why it becomes such a groove, that neural pathway. It becomes our brain learns the pattern well. And so once our brain has come to expect, this reward in certain situations, it then starts to present itself as cravings, urges, desire. That's the conditioned expectation. But the good news is that since it's learned, you can unlearn it, is the idea.
Can you give me an overview of like how you teach your clients how to unlearn this? How do you use your psychology skills to do that?
Sure. Well, mostly I use the coaching tools because I have found that that is like the best, most direct way to affect change, in my opinion. So I use the three-letter acronym AIM as a guide, AIM, and
AIM.
yeah,
Okay. AIM. Got it.
AIM. So the A is for allow, and that means allowing the craving you experience to go unanswered. And this is different from how we usually respond to a craving. Usually, we do one of three things when we experience a craving or urge. Like we react, which just means we have the drink, and that reinforces and strengthens the habit.
Right.
We might distract ourselves. And that's what I was doing a lot of the time with that other numbing behavior, the eating, the Netflix. I also throw in this category avoiding maybe social situations where
Yep.
you're going to be, friends will be drinking or something and you don't want to be exposed to that. And then a third way is resisting, and that's kind of what we think of as the white knuckling, like
Right.
holding on for dear life, the fighting against it.
Yeah. So how is allowing different? What does an allow look like?
Yeah, so from the outside, allowing might resemble resisting, but it's different in that instead of fighting against, like bracing yourself against the craving, you're opening up to it. You're letting it in. And from an observer's perspective, you're watching it run its course.
Like you're just noticing what your brain's doing. Like we've taught our listeners in earlier podcasts about being the watcher,
Yes,
where you like step back and watch your brain. Is that what allowing looks like?
that's exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm also adding this piece of like, watching it in your body. And that's really what allowing the urge is. So you sort of sink into your body. I like to start by telling people, remind yourself that nothing's gone wrong. Like your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do.
Wow.
Uh,
Wait, what?
I know.
Really?
That's,
So wait, say that again. Nothing's gone wrong?
right.
Seriously?
Well, our brains evolved to be efficient. So when we repeat a thought, a feeling, and an action, which is what happens when we drink, we have the thought that we would like the drink, we have a feeling or a desire for the alcohol, and then we have it, we reward ourselves with it. We create that neural pathway. And when our brain sees like it's a pattern, it wants to be efficient. So it kicks it to that pattern to your lower brain where it runs on autopilot. I mean, think of all the habits you have in your day to day life that serve you.
Even just driving to work where I don't have to think about it. It's
Yeah,
on autopilot because I've worn that groove, that
right.
highway so many
Yeah,
times. My car drives it by itself.
exactly. And that's kind of the situation we get into with alcohol. So,
Fascinating.
yeah, so you're reminding yourself that nothing's gone wrong. You just take a breath, you remind yourself you're safe in this moment because a lot of us have been avoiding these cravings for so long. We've become kind of afraid of them that they're going to overwhelm us or never go away.
Right.
So you just breathe and then you watch it in your body. You start to notice where it is. Does it feel like like a buzzing in your head? Is it heavy in your stomach? Is it tight in your chest? You just watch it. Watch, does it move? You can ask yourself questions about it. Just describe it to yourself. And you'll see that eventually it will rise, it will crest, it will start to decrease and eventually pass.
Like within a couple of minutes?
Yeah, it can. Absolutely.
How long does it usually take?
Well, they say that a feeling takes, which is what that desire for alcohol is, it's a feeling. They say that it takes a feeling 90 seconds to
That's
run a
it?
chemical path in your body, unless I know that sounds totally ridiculous to most people, right? Because
It sounds awesome. If I just have to sit there and watch it for 90 seconds, I was thinking like a lot longer. So that, yeah.
well, yeah. Well, the problem is that we then feed that feeling with a lot of thoughts, so if you're just to watch it in your body, it could potentially run its course in 90 seconds. For some people, it's more, especially when you're starting out. But when we feed it with thoughts like, our brain's just going to offer us a lot of, sort of
Right.
thoughts to
Chatter.
give you permission. Yeah. Like, oh, just one won't hurt. You can start tomorrow. It's no big deal. Everybody drinks,
And if you just allow that to go too and just watch it and be like, oh yeah, brain. Okay, toddler, go.
Right.
Go. Okay. I see you. We're
Or
going to do
just
it this
sitting there
way.
telling yourself like, oh, this is no fair. I feel deprived. It's going to keep it there a lot longer, but
Right.
90 seconds to 10 minutes. But yeah, so you're just going to watch it in your body at first. And like I said, this probably sounds like a crazy plan to a lot of people, but because we think cravings need to be avoided, but they're bearable. They're unpleasant, but most people describe them as a feeling of restlessness.
And it gets better over time as you get used to allowing it. And then the urge goes away to the point that you don't have the desire so much.
Correct. Yeah.
Or at all, right? So that's
Absolutely.
the A, the allowing. A, I am. What's I? Tell me about I.
So I is it for investigate, and that's where you're really digging into the fuel for your habit. And by this, I mean like the thoughts, which we've alluded to some, the emotions and the situational cues that are attached to the habit. So
Okay.
you're looking for what thoughts come before your craving. Like it could just be something very innocent and simple, like I deserve one.
I've had a hard day.
I've had a hard day. Yeah. What thoughts or convincing excuses come up during a craving is something else you want to look for. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, like one won't hurt.
Right.
What beliefs do you have about alcohol that seem true? And these are the things that are part of our cultural narrative. Like it's glamorous or we're more fun when we drink.
Uh-huh.
And then this is a big one. What situations does alcohol make easier for you? In other words,
Oh,
yeah,
that's not what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say in what situations are there triggers, but you kind of flip that around to what situations are
yeah,
you,
does alcohol make easier for you? Like what emotions does it make easier for you to handle? And this is an important one to pause on because most of us try to cut back or quit drinking because of the negative consequences of alcohol.
right?
But in doing so, we kind of overlook what alcohol was doing for us, what problem it was solving for us.
Right.
And so when stress does build up or we've had a bad day or we have decision fatigue, that old programming of like a drink will fix this for me kind of comes back in. And that's when we find ourselves back in it.
Okay. So A is for allowing.
Mhm.
I is for investigate. What is M for? Tell me about M.
M is for mind management. And this is where all the tools you teach on the Becoming Virtuosa podcast come into play. The mind management helps us build our emotional resilience and mitigate stressors through our day so we don't need to take the edge off at night, right? And it helps create lives that we don't want to escape from through alcohol.
So that's the part where we're like building the lives that we want to build on purpose, that abundance life, so that we're enjoying it so much that we don't feel like drinking.
That's the goal. That's the goal. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. So AIM.
Yeah. And AIM works to retrain your brain because, like we said, the brain likes to be efficient. So when it realizes that craving isn't getting rewarded with alcohol, your brain will eventually learn to stop asking for it. Just like a toddler who's used to getting candy, who no longer gets it, is going to realize the tantrum is not worth
Not working. Or my Ollie who's sitting behind me, when we train our pets for behaviors. It's the same thing.
Exactly.
Fascinating.
Exactly.
All right. So great interview, Jennifer. Great tools. I think our listeners are really going to enjoy hearing about the AIM tools and this different way of thinking about alcohol. Tell me what your bottom line is. Bring it on home. Like if you want to just leave our listeners with the big main thought of encouragement for them, what would you say?
I think the bottom line for this is that I want people to know they aren't broken. Their brain is built to be efficient and to create habits and to seek pleasure. And if you're struggling with drinking, it actually means that your brain is working as it was designed. And once you understand that, you can start to harness your brain's desire for efficiency and create a new habit that works in your favor.
So cool. You are not broken. I love that. That's a great thought to carry with us into the week. Jennifer, I want to thank you so much for interviewing with us today. This has been great information. It's been a lot of fun talking with you.
It was
Thanks
a pleasure. Thanks, Sue.
Would you just tell our listeners, if they want to work with you, how they would find you?
Of course. Well, they can, of course, find me at Virtuosa Coaching.
Yes. Awesome.
If they have more questions or are interested in working together. And if they would like to know more about me or my approach, they can also check out my website, which is thevividlife.com. And they can find me on Instagram and Facebook. There's links to those at The Vivid Life. So.
Perfect. And we'll put those in our show notes below the podcast so they can find those and check you out. And yeah, great. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful week.
All right. You too. Thanks, Sue.
Bye.
Bye.
Wasn't that an amazing interview? You are not broken. You are not broken and you're not alone. Your brain has been built to be efficient, to create habits, to seek pleasures. If you're struggling with overdrinking, it actually means your brain is working as it's designed. And so now that you have that idea, you can move forward in creating new habits that work in your favor. So cool. Like we said in the beginning, this can apply to any kind of habits. And that's the really good news, is we don't have to be stuck with our habits. We have tools to be able to overcome them. Okay, so now I'm getting to the part of the podcast. It's my favorite part, where we get to talk about what we're listening to and reading. Today we're listening to Hallelujah. So my favorite cover of this song is Jeff Buckley's cover. And I love it because he starts with this big breath, just like this. And then he goes into this beautiful melody in this song by Leonard Cohen. And it's an amazing song. I chose this today because as we're going through life, and specifically when we're talking about something like this that can be an emotionally charged subject that a lot of people are passionate about, I think that having different versions of the same theme is important, because we're all going to like different versions of it. We're all going to find different versions that resonate with us. Music is sound wave. It resonates. It's just like finding the right thing that works for you and developing the habits and the life that you want. Not everything is going to fit everybody. So I love this song, Hallelujah. It's one of my favorite ones. I have a playlist with lots of different versions of it, in fact, and I'm putting the link for that in the podcast notes from today. So I've got a YouTube playlist. It's not mine. I found it. It's by somebody else, but it has about 37 covers with some of my favorite covers of the song and lots of different versions. I hope you enjoy listening to that. And then what we're reading this week is a book called This Naked Mind by Annie Grace. This book in and of itself is therapy. It's an interesting walk through the mind thought process regarding alcohol. And as the person reads the book, it actually helps them to consider their thoughts and offer different thoughts to the mind. And by the time you get to the end of the book, you have like this whole bank of other thoughts that you can choose to think around your habits. Specifically, alcohol is what she talks about. So Annie Grace, This Naked Mind, excellent book, different approach to cutting back drinking. Because this subject is such a hot topic, we also put lots of links to other resources in the podcast notes. I'm not going to go through them all here, but I did want to just make sure that you have the links to Jennifer's website and her resources. So check that out in the podcast notes. All right, so next week we're going to be doing another hot topic. I can't get away from these. So much fun. So we're going to be talking with Amanda Kingsley, and we're going to be talking about reproductive health and justice. Reproductive health, reproductive justice, and coaching. Our thoughts around reproductive health and justice, injustice. Okay, my virtuosos, looking forward to it. Have a wonderful week. Love you so much. Love always, Sue. And I will see you next week in episode 19.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Becoming Virtuosa. If you want to find out more, come check out virtuosacoaching.com. That's virtuosa with an A, coaching.com. See you next week.